Hello and welcome everybody. By now, if you have watched Avengers Endgame a few times, then you must have some 3000 questions. How come Thanos dies twice? And if 2014 Thanos died in 2023, then does Infinity War even happen? How come Thor and Hulk are so weak and underpowered in Endgame? In Avengers Infinity War, Thor almost killed Thanos, who had the completed Infinity Gauntlet. But in Endgame, Thor is almost killed by Thanos, who doesn't even have a single Infinity Stone. And last but not the least, when Captain America goes back in time to return the stones, he doesn't have the stones in the same form in which they were taken. We can clearly see in the briefcase that he is carrying that there is no Tesseract, but only the Space Stone. Likewise, no Loki's scepter, but only the Mind Stone. And how does he even return the Soul Stone? Does he get a soul back, a soul for a soul? Today we try to answer most of these questions.
Together, you and I, we can kill Thanos.
I will announce all the winners on 1st of June. So yeah, if you enjoy Marvel and superhero content, then welcome to the channel and be a part of the journey. And in case you have any questions, then feel free to message me on Instagram. Now with that out of the way, let's get this video started. Avengers Endgame wrapped up major MCU storylines in the most beautiful way possible. It rarely happens that fans' expectations is met with such a satisfying response all across. Be it the critics or box office records, Avengers Endgame will go down in the history books as one of the most ambitious and monumental movies ever attempted. Avengers Endgame solves Infinity War's cliffhanger by invoking time travel. Avengers travel in the past to collect the stones and snap their own freaking fingers to bring back the Avengers who perished in the decimation. Endgame tries to address most of the loose ends of the MCU, and it does so astonishingly well, but in doing so it raises a few questions of its own. And if you think hard about some of the things that happen in Endgame, you might conclude that Endgame doesn't make sense and it is full of plot holes. But that might not be necessarily the case. To get hold of most of these mind-boggling questions, we must first understand how time travel works in Endgame. Professor Hulk and Tony explain the rules of quantum physics and why time doesn't work the way it is shown in most of the time travel movies. In layman terms, when you travel in the past and change a series of events, that doesn't magically change the present. Rather, it just creates a new timeline where things happen differently. If you are not into quantum mechanics, then it might sound like a pure fantasy, but it is a leading theory in the field. There is even a hypothesis that there are infinite number of parallel realities and everything that can happen does happen. To avoid any confusion, let's just call the main timeline where all the events that we have seen since Iron Man 1 to Avengers Endgame as MCU Prime. When Avengers traveled back in time, they changed some of the events, like Loki escaping with the Mind Stone. They created a new reality, a reality where Loki escaped, and Captain America knows that Bucky is alive way before he meets him in Winter Soldier, and people at Hydra think that Captain America is Hydra too. This new timeline is a different reality than MCU Prime. Likewise, when Nebula's memories entangle with the past Nebula and Thanos learns about the future, it creates another parallel reality. And the amazing thing about this new reality is that Thanos never snaps his fingers, as he just disappeared in 2014 and never returned. In this new reality, Infinity War never happened, and thus nobody ever turned to dust. And probably Tony and Natasha are still alive. Again, this is a parallel reality and a different timeline than MCU Prime. So now you know who were the two Thanos that died in Endgame. In the beginning of the movie, it was the MCU Prime Thanos that dies at the farm in the year 2023. And at the end of the movie, it is Thanos from another timeline that gets dusted as Tony Stark snaps his fingers. Till this point, we have at least two new timelines, one where Loki escaped in 2012, and God knows what happens after. Maybe we'll find that out in one of the TV shows that Disney has planned for its upcoming streaming platform, the Disney+. And we have this other timeline where after 2014 is no Thanos, no Nebula and no Gamora, as MCU Prime Nebula kills the other Nebula, and the Gamora of that timeline is now a part of MCU Prime. So one thing that we can say for sure about this new timeline is that Guardians of the Galaxy happens very differently, as Peter of that timeline never meets Gamora. The Ancient One tries to explain exactly this to Bruce Banner when he asks for the Time Stone. She tells him that if he takes the Time Stone, he will create a new timeline where there will be no Time Stone, and thus Sorcerer Supreme can't protect that reality from the evil forces. Banner's plan is to return the stones back in the time exactly at the moment that they were taken, so that no such new reality is created where one of the stones is missing. So at the end of the movie, Banner sends Captain America with all of the 6 Infinity Stones and Thor's hammer to restore them at the moment that they were taken. But this is where things get more complicated, as we don't know how one returns the Soul Stone. Does Captain America go to Vormir and just hands over the stone to the Red Skull? Or is there a different process? Maybe in the future interviews, the directors will give us a clear answer. When Cap returns the Space Stone, he doesn't return it in the form of Tesseract. So in theory, this would be another parallel reality where after 1970, Sheild finds that Tesseract has magically changed into the Space Stone. And in the different reality where Loki escaped with the Tesseract in 2012, his scepter also went missing and it was replaced by just the Mind Stone. If that wasn't it, Captain America decides to stay back in the past and spend his life with Peggy Carter. This might have been a fitting payoff to the character, but it raises some serious question. Did it create a new reality? And if this created a new reality, then at the end of the movie where Falcon and Bucky find old Cap sitting on the bench is a different reality than MCU Prime. But I don't think Marvel is going for that. So if the last scene is the part of MCU Prime, then that means that there were two Captain Americas in the MCU Prime all along. And since he was from the future, he would have explained that to Peggy Carter and asked her to keep his presence a secret, which to an extent does make sense. So to sum things up, even though returning the Infinity Stones might have avoided the creation of new realities where one of these stones were missing, but nonetheless, the events of Endgame did create a bunch of new parallel realities. Here I would like to point out an interesting fact about Black Widow, who actually died in 2014. So yeah, she was all well in 2018 when she fought Thanos and survived the decimation and goes on to live until 2023. But then she dies in 2014 at Vormir. So I was just wondering which year will be marked on her tombstone. Will it be 2023 or 2014? Let me know in the comments what you think about that. So that's it for today. We'll discuss about Thor and Hulk in the next video. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe to enter the giveaways.